Please rise for a silent reflection and pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Cynthia? Here. Mr. Dibber?
Here.
Mrs. King?
Here.
Mr. Schuler?
Here.
Mr. Tinkin?
Here.
Mr. Borbach?
Here.
Mayor Mechanica?
Here. Please read the Open Meeting Act.
Pursuant to the requirements of New Jersey's Open Public Meetings Act, notice of this meeting was included in the annual meeting notice filed in the office of the Borough Clerk, posted on the Borough website and here in the municipal building, published as a legal notice in the CoStar newspaper, and mailed to those requesting notice and providing payment in accordance with Borough policy.
Thank you. I need a motion to approve the agenda in a second.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Do we have any questions? A roll call, Chair.
Mrs. Cynthia?
Yes.
Mr. Dibber?
Yes.
Mrs. King?
Yes.
Mr. Schuler?
Yes.
Mr. Tinkin?
Yes.
Mr. Borbach?
Yes.
We have a scheduled public hearing for ordinance number 2013-4. Need a motion and a second to open the public hearing.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
This is a way to meeting where if you have a comment or you'd like to speak on ordinance number 2013-4, rezoning of certain properties in Spring Lake Heights, just have to step forward, give your name and address.
Mayor, before we actually open the public or proceed to the public, just for the record, I want to provide the council with an update regarding the various aspects of the notice regarding this ordinance. First of all, this ordinance was introduced at our last meeting on June 24th, and the notice of introduction and public hearing was published in summary form in the June 27th CoStar newspaper, was provided to adjacent municipalities via certified mail on June 27th, was provided to the Monmouth County Planning Board by certified mail on June 27th. A copy of the ordinance together with the hearing notice was also provided by regular and certified mail to the owners of property that are the subject of the rezoning. The copy of the ordinance and notice of hearing was also provided by regular and certified mail to the owners of property located within 200 feet of those properties proposed for rezoning based on a list prepared by the borough's tax assessor. The ordinance was also sent to the planning board for referral under the municipal land use law for determination of consistency with the master plan. The planning board met on June 25th and reviewed the ordinance and has provided today a copy of a letter from the planning board attorney which indicates that the ordinance is consistent with the master plan, and the referral also included a recommendation for the elimination or the removal of 2 lots. If I may, I'll cite that specifically. Please be advised that the attorney was duly authorized and directed by the planning board to make this communication. The planning board considered the governing body's request for further review regarding certain proposed permitted uses in the B3 zone. I'm sorry, actually referring to the previous one. By date of July 8th, 2013, to the mayor and council, the planning board attorney advises that the planning board reviewed the proposed ordinance designated as ordinance 2013-4 at the regular meeting of the planning board held on June 26th for the purpose of determining the consistency of said ordinance with the borough's Spring Lake Heights master plan. Please be advised that upon review, the planning board has determined that the ordinance is consistent with the intent and purposes of the master plan. Please be further advised that the planning board notes that retail sales of alcohol is not included in the permitted uses in the proposed B3 zone, and therefore recommends the deletion of property known as Block 46, Lots 9 and 10 from the proposed B3 zone. This is the property presently containing a commercial establishment known as St. Stephen's Green. The board makes this recommendation because of the long existence of this type of establishment has enjoyed at the site because the property itself contains no residential component, which is to be changed to commercial use, making its inclusion in the zone unnecessary to the other property.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I would make a motion to accept the planning board's recommendations to remove those two lots, also noting its recommendation that it is consistent with the master plan.
We have a second?
I'll second it.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, just a point of order. I thought this was the public comment period.
Before we vote on it.
No, if you still need to adjust.
It's a motion to accept the planning board's report and to revise the ordinance in accordance with the planning board's recommendations prior to opening up the public, to the public.
I don't think the mayor had opened it up.
There's a second. We have a second.
There is a motion and a second to revise the ordinance before having the public come forward and speak on the ordinance. And again, the proposed change that has been recommended by the planning board is to remove the lots known as block 46.01, lots 9 and 10, and they are the location of St. Stephen's Green, an existing bar and restaurant within the borough. Those properties would remain as their current designation, which is the B2 zoning. Those two lots were not split zoned, as a number of the other properties that are within the proposed rezoning are, that currently are business zone to a certain degree. The area of the lots that face Route 71 are business zone, and the back of those lots is part of a residential zone. These two lots are not split zoned in that manner and would simply remain as B2.
Wait, if,
To Tom's point, can we rescind the motion to open the public hearing?
Yes, Mayor, that would be.
Tom, would that be okay?
I'm interested in hearing from the public.
Well,
Well,
especially.
we will hear from the public.
If you remove lot 9 and 10, that would change the whole petition. That's currently you remove lot 9 and 10, you have a petition out there with 200 feet from the designated area. You're changing the designated area after a petition has already been entered.
That's a good point.
Correct.
Absolutely.
Mayor, in view of the fact that you had taken a motion and a second and a vote to open up to the public, under Robert's Rules of Order, we ought to open up to the public, and I would request that the motion to amend the ordinance at this time be withdrawn, and it can be made once again at a later point during tonight's proceedings.
I'll withdraw it.
Thank you. At this time, the public may speak on this ordinance. Yes, John, I'm sorry. John has his hand up.
John Cantor, 564 Atlantic Avenue. I was here 2 weeks ago at the last meeting, and, we were talking about this issue, and Mr. Diver suggested that anyone here should read closely the ordinance. So I went home and I read the ordinance closely, and I noticed on page 5 of the ordinance, which is the setbacks, if you have it in front of you, see page 5, you'll notice that the B3, which is the proposed zone, the front yard setback is 15 feet. Now, the zone that exists now, the B2 zone, it's 30 feet. So the setback would be 15 feet closer to the street than it is now. I also noticed that in the body of the ordinance, it states that parking lots are prohibited on the front of State Highway 71, which means the parking lot would have to be behind any building that would be built out here. Now, both Mr. Diver here and at the planning board, and also Mr. Ray Miller, who's a planning board member, made statements that they were trying to prevent this area looking like West Belmar. Okay? And if anybody's familiar with West Belmar, you'll notice that building on 71 that's very close to the highway that's kind of constricted, you're kind of cramped in. This ordinance actually replicates what exists in West Belmar. I went there yesterday with a tape measure and measured the street. And the West Belmar building is 14 and a half feet from the curb. So though you're saying you want to stop it from looking like West Baltimore, this ordinance will produce exactly what you're saying you want to stop from happening. So I really think that if you're going to proceed in any way with this ordinance, you really got to change the setbacks. You don't want a building 15 feet from the street. Okay? And that's my statement. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sharon Batto, Beverly Avenue. Mayor, I have a couple of more signatures to add to my petition, if I may give this to Mr. Delaney.
And Mayor, just it should be noted that Ms. Patel has previously submitted a petition on Friday afternoon, which is still under review. I have concluded a preliminary review of the signatures. It is not completed. We've had ongoing discussions as recently as 8 o'clock with the Borough Attorney regarding the status of that review. But I previously reported to the council and distributed a copy of that petition, as well as the subsequent notifications that at this time it would probably be best to also note that there were 3 individuals that signed the petition originally and have since requested that their names be removed from the petition. So the petition is still somewhat of a in a fluid form.
Thank you.
But I have noted the receipt of these additional. And that being said, if I was going, when I started this petition, and I worked on it very hard, for over a week, I've still been working on this. If the criteria is different than I was told on July 1st, then I want to go on record as requesting that I can resubmit it with, so that it meets the criteria if it doesn't, although I believe that it does. Also, Mayor, almost to the person, every single person that signed my petition, number one, either are against so much commercial that they don't want the B3 zone, and or they want you to take the time to discuss alternatives besides B3, which we have not, and there are several out there. They also feel that it is incomplete. There are things that are left out. First thing I saw was that if you look under restricted uses, which there's only 8 on there, I didn't see car dealership. I didn't see gentleman's club. What I did see also in permitted uses was a dry cleaner. And we know what happened with the White Swan dry cleaner. And it's not specific that it's an eco-friendly dry cleaner. So I just want you to know that I worked very hard, and you also have to remember our March meeting. It's not the will of the people to do this. And especially, we shouldn't be doing this when I feel like it's incomplete. The ordinance is incomplete. Something should not be passed that's incomplete, and it's not for the good of the people who can't just pick up and leave. But if something like this goes through with no plan whatsoever, just draw in a circle and go, let's call this B3. We'll have to live with the ramifications of that. The traffic is just increasingly worse on Highway 71, and I'm afraid of having a Highway 71 in my backyard, that the traffic's going to get so bad that someone's going to find a way to widen Highway 71, and they'll certainly go east before they go west into Fairway Mews. I really feel, Mayor, that this is a Pandora's box. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor. And just as a clarification, Sharon,
Thank you. Yes, sir.
on page 2, it says dry cleaning and laundry pickup station. It is a pickup station, not a plant.
It
They would
says
not-
dry cleaning and laundry pickup.
Pickup station,
Well, then it's
meaning the
down
plant
there.
would not be allowed on the premises for dry cleaning.
Well, that's not what it says. It's very hard to understand, and that's why, again.
That's the intent.
Well, you know, I'm not psychic. I know what I read, and everybody feels like they're really rushing this. It was only introduced at the last meeting. What's going on here? I just feel like there's not full disclosure. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. I know there's a lot going on behind the scenes because I witnessed it last week. And I'm just learning a lot. And I just think that there's a reason why somebody's rushing this. certainly not for my greater good or my property values.
Okay, was there a ruling as far as the petition is concerned?
There has not been a final determination. As I said, as evidenced by Sharon's presenting additional signatures this evening, I will tell you that as we walked into the meeting, there were, I believe, 122 signatures that had been preliminarily determined to be valid. And based on a very preliminary review, it appears that the 20% lot area threshold has also been met.
It has been that, the 20%.
Again, that is not a final determination.
But the problem is that if you take out these 2 lots like you want to do, that could change that, correct?
I would defer to the borough attorney, but I believe that, yes, if the subject properties change as part of the ordinance by amendment, then the calculation would have to be redone to reflect that.
Okay, and I just want to point out that you sent Sharon an email on Monday, July 1st, and said that your reading of the law was that 20% of the owners, basically you said she needed 23 signatures, or 22.4 signatures. So technically that's 22 signatures, not 23, but you said that,
I believe it's 22.6, which becomes 23, but, and that was...
22.4 is,
No, it's actually...
Sorry,
but,
this is the public hearing.
Alan Nebakowski, One Hampton Court. I'd just like to do a little bit of clarification on the St. Stephen's Green area here. Would that be considered a grandfather situation?
If it's stated in B3.
And I believe that question may be better directed to the borough attorney.
Yes, any of the properties would be grandfathered in the current zoning.
Okay. In case that structure was destroyed, or they opt to move into the residential space, and that particular element becomes non-existent, they transfer the liquor license to the other portion of this development. What would subsequently happen to any of the setbacks, any of the buffers? What would happen to the zone that's now being classified as grandfather?
If the buildings come down, then the properties will be subject to the requirements of the new B3 zone.
Under, I guess, when you say come down could come to a couple of different methodologies. One could be natural acts, one could be developer, the other could be fire, flood,
Right.
whatever. In those situations, it was my understanding that part of that building was a historical component. And in so much, what would constitute that being torn down at all?
I'm not aware of the historic component or how that would play into this. That's a separate topic. The issue of whether the property would continue to be grandfathered as a pre-existing non-conforming use in the B3 zone would be determined based upon whether that structure remains or whether it is removed, whether it be through fire or through other means.
But what's, in other words, okay, so it's in a grandfather clause today, and now it's gone. Now what? Would that automatically default to the new guideline? Or somebody could come in there and put a subsequent structure, and how would we deal with that?
Any new structure would be subject to the B3 zoning.
And setbacks.
Does anybody have clarification? Anybody have, do you have anything on the historical components here? Because my understanding was, I don't know, we've had some discussions with, various members that certain percentages, if the structure was damaged, if it was 50% or less, it would have to be reconstructed in its existing state. Anything more than that would then be entitled to be leveled.
at the new code.
At the
Am
new
I-
code,
I
right.
believe that's a BOGO code thing.
Yeah, and I'm just trying to get clarification in
If
terms
the
of
building-
that, because what could happen is you could take a liquor license and move 100 yards and that building could sit there and not have, help me, just, I'm looking for help.
I don't think that would work that way. If the building per se, for example, were to burn to the ground, that would be considered abandonment in the terms.
Okay.
You would lose the license. The license would not carry.
Okay.
If they sold the restaurant to someone else, for example, another example, if you sold the restaurant to someone else and they came in and decided to do renovations to the restaurant,
Okay.
the license carries. But if you had, say, a building destroyed by, natural disaster or fire, natural disaster, that would very well be considered abandonment, and to retrieve that license, they would have to get a variance.
Yeah, I just think, again, my vote is to say, I think we need a little more clarification in respect to, township attorney's ruling on this. But, I mean, it would be best understood a little bit more in that regard. The second component is, again, the what ifs, as part of the master plan. What if St. Stephen's opts to say, I like that new facility there. Now, would that, if it was no longer a restaurant, then what happens? Then would it have to conform? Would there have to be a buffer zone? Would there have
It's
to
no
be
longer,
separate?
it's the building that's an issue. It would be the building that's an issue.
Maybe
In
I'm
other
a
words,
little
if that
lost.
building turned into offices, it's grandfathered in its current state.
I guess I'm a little confused in terms of why it wouldn't be part of the overall master plan and its reason.
It's the recommendation of the planning board that we remove that because of its, and I'll say it specifically, the right classes.
I hear you.
Property is present, please be further advised that the planning board notes that retail sales of alcohol is not included in the permitted uses in the proposed B3 zone, and therefore recommends the deletion of property known as blocks 46.0, lots 9 and 10 from the proposed B3 zone. So if they were to say, the building burned down, they couldn't move next door because the alcohol use is not going to be permitted. And if that building burned down and there were to be a new building constructed, it would be subject, whether it's the B2 or the B3, it would be subject to the code presently stated. It would change for them. This is a building that's been there, as I'm sure you know, for well over 100 years. It was a stagecoach station and a grist mill, and there's actually a stream that runs under it. Everybody can just go walk by St. Stephen's Green, you see the water coming out every day. But they recommended that for that simple reason that these is a long-established business that's there. They wanted us to be fair to that business in that regard. I certainly don't have a problem doing that, and I understand their concern in that regard because they said this is the property containing a commercial establishment. The board makes this recommendation because of the long existence that this type of establishment has enjoyed at the site, and because the property itself contains no residential component, which is true, there is not a residential component to it at the rear, which is to be changed to commercial use, making its inclusion in the zone unnecessary and anomalous to the other properties.
Okay. I guess I just would leave it, just like to get a little clarification in terms of the historical facet of it, if there's any implications in terms of construction or anything on that, and how that would apply to the overall master plan. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
I just also want to point out, there's 5 residential zones and there's 3 commercial zones. And for some reason, they put this forward that everybody's going to want the most commercial, B3, the most commercialized zone for this large, where everything else right now is B2. Everything else is B2. Why isn't it B2, not B3? So, I mean, we just have a lot of questions as to a lot of things that need to be answered. And this petition doesn't stop anything. The B3 is still introduced. All this petition does is allow us more time to get to the bottom of certain issues.
All right, thank you.
Just as clarification, the B2 as opposed to the B3, the B2 allows gas stations, it allows motels, it is a heavier commercial footprint. The B3 is commercial light retail, office space. That's what B3 is. That's the difference. It is a much lighter imprint.
And B1 is banks. B1 is
Out of order.
Kathleen Crippen, 564 Atlantic Avenue. I would like to submit some documentation to the clerk, and Mr. Delaney, I would ask that, I would like to receive a receipt for these, and it be on the record that the titles, this is a series of reports that were prepared by Monmouth County Planning Board dealing with the master plan, how to do your reexamination report, noticing procedures. It is a copy of the 1978, 86, 96, 2008 Master Plan Revision Reexamination Report. It is a copy of the June 20th, 2012 Planning Evaluation by the Borough Engineer, and it is a copy of the New Jersey Permanent Statutes Title 440 Municipalities and Counties Municipal Land Use Law.
Thank you.
I'm submitting those so that now anybody on the council that has any questions about that, now they can't say they didn't have the information because now you have it. Mr. Mayor, I'm going to ask your indulgence for a moment to help out. Could you hold that, please?
Sure.
That is 15 feet. That's what you're proposing your setback from the curb of Route 71 to the front of the buildings. You're proposing in that space also a 5-foot sidewalk and a 5-foot planting strip between the sidewalk and the building. You probably are going to take up another 5 feet along the curb with phone poles, utility boxes, things like that. So there's your 15-foot setback to the front of your building. You also, in this ordinance, have a requisite that every business have 2 park benches in front of it. Where are the benches going to go? You're going to have people sitting out on the highway. Now, just to go a little further, 20 foot. That's your back buffer. That's the back buffer in the B1 zone. It's the back buffer in the B2 zone. It's the proposed back buffer in the B3 zone. For the people in Wickham Manor that are concerned, a 20-foot buffer in winter is nothing. You are going to have light spill from the buildings. If you went another 10 feet to 30 feet, over 30? That's 30 feet. If you said we're going to have a 30-foot back buffer and 50% of it must be planted with evergreens, now you're going to provide some protection for the people along the back for things like light spill, noise, garbage pickup, the snow plow that comes at 1 o'clock in the morning to plow the lot when there's a storm. So I think you want to rethink your setbacks a little bit. I think that right now in the B1 and the B2, you have a 30-foot setback in the front. If you drive down the highway and you look at things like Mount Swan Savings Bank, that's a nice building, Investor Savings Bank. It's a nice building. You have a sidewalk, you have a lawn, the building is 30-foot back. When I ask people, what is the problem with parking in front of the building, the only answer I can get from anybody is Eileen Islandberger thinks it looks nice. Well, with all due respect to Eileen Islandberger, I don't like the parking in the back of the building. I went over to RKE Athletics at 8 o'clock on Friday night. There was one other car behind that building, and I got out and realized I was the only one there, and you can't be seen from the highway. That is not a safe situation. Now, the other thing I would like to point out is for the borough attorney, Fred, once again, can we have the definition of spot zoning?
Spot zoning essentially is the use of the zoning power to benefit particular private interests rather than the collective interests of the community. The question is, does the zone change further a comprehensive plan of the borough, or is it designed merely to relieve a lot or lots from the burden of a general regulation? Importantly, if the ordinance treats all similarly circumstanced properties alike, it is not invalid as spot zoning. And essentially, spot zoning occurs when a municipality seeks to relieve a particular property of a burden imposed by its zoning classification so as to benefit the lot or owner or to permit an incompatible use. It is essentially an improper attempt to grant a variance. The question is, does the zoning benefit only one particular or certain property owners, or is it in furtherance of a comprehensive plan of the borough? Here, what has been presented is a rezoning which has been recommended by the planning board and which has been determined by the planning board to be consistent with the master plan, and I'll just leave it at that.
But so far, nobody's been able to provide a definition of how this change would be for the greater good of the community in addition, just that it benefits.
Well, I just want to, Fred stopped on that, it's a Supreme Court ruling, and it says, as explained by the Supreme Court, spot zoning is the antithesis of plan zoning. The test is whether a particular provision of the zoning ordinance is made with the purpose or effect of furthering a comprehensive scheme, or whether it is designed merely to relieve a lot, or lots, plural, from the burden of a general regulation. Which is exactly
And
what
the
we're
big
talking about.
argument is that there's a residential strip back there that became landlocked. That's fine, make it B2. It's adjacent to a B2 zone, just strip out that R5 and make it all B2. What's the big hoo-ha about it? Now, I also want to point something else out, and this goes back to the engineering evaluation. And I want this on record again. It is recommended that this area be considered for rezoning to possibly accommodate an entirely commercial use, a strictly residential use, or a mixed use. An analysis of potential highway access is also recommended in order to plan for as few driveways onto Route 71 as possible, with shared access between the lots and coverage. This could be accomplished through construction of an interior connector road parallel to Route 71, which would also provide a means for efficient access to the rear portion of the lots and off-street parking areas. Based upon the existing surrounding uses in this area, each of the rezoning considerations has merit. It is suggested that the council review these alternative uses and provide comment. I have every council meeting for the last 3 years on videotape, and this has never been discussed at an open meeting. And I would also like to state then that I believe the whereases in your ordinance introduction are wrong, because you have one in here that says, whereas as a result of their planning evaluation, the borough's engineer and planning consultant have recommended that all of the properties be rezoned and reclassified to a new zoning district to be known as B3 commercial zone, and that the residential component of the properties be eliminated. I would respectfully submit that that is not in the planning evaluation that the engineer submitted. It's very clear what he asked for, and that's not his recommendation. Thank you.
Mayor, just to make sure that the record is clear, I wanted to clarify, I believe something that Ms. Crippen indicated was that the property line, the setback is measured from the curb to the building. And the building setback requirement is actually measured from the property line to the building. So the planting strip and the sidewalk is in addition to the setback requirement, not a reduction from the setback requirement. Additionally, it's my recollection that, and again, by way of background, although this ordinance was introduced in June of this year, the planning evaluation by the borough's engineer was performed in June of last year, at which time the council specifically referred the engineer's report to the planning board for review, at which time the planning board reviewed the planner and engineer's report and recommended to the council the B3 zone, the new zone for this area. That was then formulated into an ordinance, which again was the recommendation from the planning board. The mayor and council conducted a special public forum at which all residents within the borough were invited to attend. That was conducted in March of this year. As a result of that meeting, the council suggested that the ordinance be modified with the elimination of, I believe it was specifically 3 or 4 uses that were previously in the first draft. That was reviewed by the planning board and came back with the planning board's recommendation that they were in concurrence with that. It was only after those steps that had been completed that the ordinance was then introduced by the council, was again referred to the planning board for the requirement that they determine its consistency with the master plan, which is the letter that I cited earlier this evening. So there has been certainly more than a year that this has been discussed at a number of council meetings, certainly at a number of planning board meetings, and I know this has been a cooperative effort, but essentially the engineer's recommendation was at first reviewed more closely by the planning board. So I wouldn't characterize your observation that some of the language in the preface to the ordinance may not include all of the facts. It does include a summary of the facts, as certainly as I understand.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah, Jay, I think you left out one little thing. The meeting in March, the public meeting, I was under the impression and the understanding that there was general consensus on the council that we'd have more meetings like that. We did not.
There were several comments by the council, and in fact, at the following meeting, it was discussed again by the council. And I believe the understanding was that, you know, if in fact the ordinance did ever proceed to introduction, which it now has, that there would be an additional public hearing as this is designed.
No, I didn't understand it that way.
And just to also clarify, that last meeting, it was...
Order. Rich is next.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that you were talking.
Just for clarification for people's information, the uses that were taken out when it went back to the planning board, outdoor dining was removed. Hardware store provided, hardware store was taken out. Garden supply store was taken out because we didn't want anybody going out, starting out lawnmowers to get the oil going through the system at 6 in the morning. And packaged liquor store and wine store, that was removed, as alcohol is not allowed in that area.
More page.
Oh, I just want to point out at the March meeting that everybody that came up and spoke, with the exception of the people that are very actively involved in this, was all against this. It was all against the B3 zoning. And I don't think that has been properly put out there.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. Bill Kelly, 5 Box Hollow Road, Spring Lake Heights. I live probably as far away from this town, from this area, than anybody does. I'm in the far southwest corner, and this is pretty much the far northeast. But anyway, my concerns here are about this borough. We are not the city of Spring Lake Heights. We are not the commercial zone of Spring Lake Heights. We are the borough of Spring Lake Heights. Borough, to me, dictates a place where families can be together to enjoy the things that families do. To put a commercial zone like that in this area is, to me, a disgrace. Has anyone thought of doing something with this, basically, and I call it spot zoning. I hope in the next budget here, if this is approved, I hope that this council puts enough money in that budget for a lawsuit that's going to come down. It's going to cost you a lot of money, I'm telling you that. But basically, what about using an area like that to make this town a better, stronger borough? What about a path for exercising? What about a community garden? You see those in the cities all the time, where people in the, a lot of these areas in our town, the not the commercial areas, the tenants in a lot of these places would love to have a little garden. What about taking a place like that, buying it from the for the town, and renting out space to people to have their own little areas? Have a walking garden, have a dog walking path, something that people enjoy. And that's a legacy for our children and our children's children. This commercial building area that's done for certain people with vested interest, that's a disgrace. And we are a town of people and families. We're not a town of profit makers for commercial buildings. It's wrong. I've been in this town as long as the mayor has. We grew up together down the street from each other. I was here since 1950, and I grew up in Hoboken, in the city. And people would die to have areas like that, a little area to breathe, to have these nice green areas, to have a walking zone, to have a place you can, I see down in a lot of places have these exercise pads and stuff. Our elder people, our younger people can use that. Do we want to have our children riding bikes on Route 71 with building 15 feet setbacks? No, we don't. God forbid something happens to someone, it's on the head of the people who would approve it. And we don't want to see that happen because this town is too nice, too good a place, too family-oriented to have it. There's a lot of things that can be done. Let's take our time. There's been studies done, like Ms. Crippen said, for many, many years. Why are we rushing this thing? Who's pushing the buttons here? The town fathers or some commercial vested interest people who are sitting back and waiting to get what they want so they can make their big score and move out? You think our neighbors to the east would ever even think about this in Spring Lake? They would laugh it out in 2 seconds.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But this is just wrong, folks, you know. And I've been around this town a long, long time. The township municipal building named after my dad, Neil Kelly, you all knew him. Been around, a good man. He cared about this town. I know these members on the council care too. But care the right way. Take your time. Look this over. There are options to be made. Maybe you have to bite the bullet and buy some of those properties to have something that our children, our grandchildren, decades to come can say, hey, this town is a place to be proud of because they did the right thing at the right time. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. I live at 1808 Highway 71. My name is Charles. I'm not going to repeat anything that someone else has said. I think all of those comments were very well made. But I live on the highway very close to where this zone will be. I guess I'm not within 200 feet, or I would have gotten notice. I'm probably a foot or more outside of it. But Highway 71 is unique, and its uniqueness needs to be examined more before there's a zoning change that impinges upon it and fronts on it. There are many children that come down Alair Road, cross over with the help of crossing guards that you, ladies and gentlemen, have provided, and scoot along the remainder of 71 to the elementary school. It's loaded with kids, and those kids are as active as any of the kids that I raised or you probably raised. Safety needs to be considered if you're going to place this type of commercial zone right next to where these kids are walking. Highway 71 is unique because it has many people that ride bicycles. I don't know, perhaps all of you have been out there on your bikes, riding along. I mean, it's a pathway. It's a pathway for people at work and don't have cars, and there's quite a few around here. It's a pathway for people like me that like to ride on flat ground, and it's a pathway for my wife that's up at 5:30 in the morning, zipping out before any cars come by. But it's a unique type of highway. And before you stick uses that have never been there before, right there in the midst of all of this activity by the residents, I believe much more needs to be looked at. You need to do these traffic surveys. You need to involve, for example, your police department. The police here have a vested interest in the borough of Spring Lake Heights. They invest their entire lives. They have opinions about public safety that should be culled and respected. I don't know if they've been asked for their opinion, but they should be. Your Department of Public Works, you have this great reservoir of people that have given a lot to the borough and have ideas and have made observations, and that should be honored. So I too join the rest of the people here that ask you to go slow. I haven't heard anyone come up to this microphone either at the meeting I was at in March or any other meeting and tell you exactly why we need to have a commercial zone here, why we need to have those permitted uses. Don't we have enough of those permitted uses in other places? Is it that there are people in that neighborhood that are dying to have a bakery there? They can't go to the bakery down the block or the bakery up the street or someplace else, who can't get their dry cleaning done and go to work every morning with a big wrinkle around their collar. The progress that you think that, or that you want to make, and I know you want to make progress here, the progress here is not established from my point of view. And the risk is still high. So I think caution. Take it slow, and at least ask the person who's asking for this change, the Aristotto Family LLC, to tell you what they plan to do. What is it that they really envision as the future for the property. After all, they own most of it. They're the ones that are moving this plan along. They're requesting it. I think that although it may not be quite the way things operate, it's not unreasonable to ask them to share their view of the future with us before we write that check by signing our names and saying, here, fill in the part that says what we pay.
Fred Manger, 61 Wickham Road. I can just stand to the side here so I can see everybody. Actually, I'm a real estate agent. I heard a lot about real estate agents from some of the people who give me some feedback, but that's what I do. I'm also a VP of the Vice President of the Wickham Manor Board, and that's why I'm here. In all probability tonight, if we do have to come down to a vote tonight, because of the petition, we'll need 5 out of 6 votes as needed. And that's opposed, and we'll probably have avoid the ability of having a simple majority, and therefore B3 will be a dead issue. So let's look at what we have picked to live with. Because remember, B2 is what is already there right now today and can be built on tomorrow. So B2 permitted uses. It's the retail sale of consumable products, wearing apparel, pharmaceuticals, that's your big box store, CVS, hardware, appliances, household goods, confections, and general merchandise. It's a bank, a fiduciary institution, business and professional offices, and medical centers. It's the sale of personal services, such as cleaners, tailors, barbershops, beauty salons, and repair and appliances and shoes. It's the transportation facility, including taxi stands, a bus passenger station, or similar uses, and such municipal facilities as deemed necessary and appropriate by the governing body of the borough. The last two, borough is restaurants and bars. But actually, restaurants and bars are on the same line. The last one is a motel. Now, I remember Bill Kelly giving me some kind of grief about the fact that there weren't 2 lots put together enough to be able to have a building. Well, actually, if we look at the square footage that's in the back here of our land use book for the town, we only need 18,000 square feet. So actually, couldn't we have the cleaners right there in the 2,400 square feet, which is where the first owner owns between the bank and the next owner? Nice 2,400 square feet available. 18,000 square feet is really what the minimum is. Got the cleaners there. Why couldn't we just drop off our stuff, go through the bank, pick up some money, go off to work, come back that night, come down, go through, pick up our stuff, go home. The next owner, contiguous property, from that point north, is just under 42,000 square feet. It's 277 by 150. If you notice, back page here, where it gives us half the square footage minimums. Minimums now, we're talking minimums in B2. B3, we were talking about maximums. In other words, the maximum for a drugstore in B3 is 3,000 square feet. The maximum for a food store was 6,000 square feet. Now we're talking about minimums. So, as At Crippen would like to have us do, with the whole thing through to B2, we're gonna have Box Store City back there on Route 71. Because the minimum square footage for a motel is 40,000 feet. Now, I really think that might be a good business plan, actually, because I could charge probably $300 a night for the room, have all the parking on the first level, have the 15 rooms for the density that I need for that building on the top, and I'd have a bar and restaurant in it, because I could move that license from someplace else in town. Perfect. The next group of properties are owned by about 4 people. That's only going to the parking lot, which is this 9 and 10, just St. Stephen's Green. That's about 45,750 feet. Somebody said a CVS. Somebody said a Starbucks. Perfect. Fit right in there. Lots of room. So what you're doing, folks, when you take a look at moving from B3 to nothing, is you're accepting B2. You just blindly got loaded with B2. As a matter of fact, the whole thing about B3, you got yelled at the door, don't go B3, there's a fire. And you know what? You got directed right into it, because B2 is a flaming fire. It allows all those things that they told you were in B3 possibly are actually right there in our book as permitted uses. There's even gas station. There's quite a bit of things that you have to also have available for a gas station, so it's unlikely one's going to go in there. But all those other uses I just mentioned, it's a home run. Now, we have a 9-member planning board. And we had one of the most unusual things happen when we came back to us with B3. They were unanimous. You know how hard it is to be unanimous in this town? It's almost impossible. Okay? There is tenure on that board. Total tenure. As a matter of fact, I think 2 of those people on there have been there 40 years. So we have almost a 200-year tenure in our planning board. It is a fabric of our town that is so precious. And we went through a lot of consideration over a whole year and a half or 2 in trying to consider just what to do with this property that has B2 in the front, R5 in the back. And they came down with a unanimous decision. B3 is probably going to be our best effort. And as Mr. Diver said, who was actually part of the planning board, it's a lighter footprint than B2. We're going to get rid of those box store things. Motels will be gone. So don't you think that the planning board read the ordinance for B2? Don't you think they were thinking about you when they did that? Absolutely. They've been doing it for a year and a half. So here we are, all of a sudden, we can't have B3. Oh no, it's no good. It's something new. Well, guess what? You go by default to B2. Totally, because it's a total approvable use today, approvable tomorrow. If you have one of those things on that list I just read, it goes to the planning board. If it meets all of the things for parking and everything else, it's going up. One of the other things I just heard tonight, and I've heard it before, is open space, or the town purchases the property. Okay, that would be very interesting if we were a rich town. Open space, you get lots of money for open space, probably all the money you need. There's lots of it out there. There's one little catch. the owners of the property sell it to open space at 50 cents on the dollar. So the $9 million that this property is all worth, if you add it all together, basically 3 property owners are giving you a $4.5 million gift. Who's smoking here? What are you smoking? That's going to happen? I don't think so. The other thing is that if we were to buy the property for $9 million, and that's only if somebody said, all 3 property owners said, yeah, I'm a nice guy. I'm going to sell this to you for its assessed value. Right. Why would I do that if I owned it? I'd want to make as much money out of this piece of property as I possibly could, either through development or sale to a developer. Guess what? It's under development today. We have a plan in place today that's ready to go. So, if we give it to open space, or if we go buy it as a town, we're going to be paying a lot more than $9 million. And what do? We're such a rich town. We can give up the $68,000 in revenue those people are paying each year. Just like that. Poof, gone. Because open space doesn't pay you any taxes as a town. Not only that, if you buy the property and now you own it as a town, you think somebody's paying the taxes on that? No. That means our cash flow just went down the tube. Now, the 7 acres in the back, the 7 acres that this whole thing, this whole big triangle represents, about 2.8 is B2. Let's call it 3. 4 acres that are R5, that's single-family housing. If we take out 1.5 acres for roads and sidewalks, we have 2.5 acres for single-family homes. Now, density is a word that we use in the zoning world, which says how many houses you can build per acre. Right here, 5.8. 5.8 means we can build 14 houses. 14 houses. We can have all their kids go to school, go to the high school, which, by the way, they go to the Manasquan High School, you have to pay per student, because we don't have a high school. We just write the check for whatever Manasquan happens to say we need to send them. So we have a high school impact, we have a school impact on our own school here. Oh, garbage pickup. 15 more, 14 more homes, garbage pickup. We have road and maintenance. We have lighting. Let's go throw some lights up, pay the electric company some more money. And we have snow removal. Well, in reality, if we go B3, there's no school. We pay nothing in school expense. We pay nothing in garbage expense. We pay nothing in road maintenance. We pay nothing in lighting. And we pay nothing in snow removal. B3 is the highest rateable with the lightest footprint. It's so much lighter than B2, you wouldn't believe. And the golden goose of the municipal world, it is the absolute pristine piece of property that you can have to develop. It supplies you with all the cash, just police and fire protection. You don't have schools and all the other things. They have to cart their own garbage, they have to pay for their own lights, they have to plow their own parking lots, the whole 9 yards, and it's a cash cow to the town. It's something we desperately need as a town. It removes the big box threat. Because remember, if we only needed 15,000 or 18,000 square feet, and we were working with 42, Guess what, if we made the whole R5 in the back B2 also? We'd have whatever back there. Somebody said they didn't want Home Depot or Lowe's. Anyway, I have forms here tonight to fill out if you want to take your name off the petition. I'm going to give them to Jay Delaney over here, who's the borough administrator. And if you'd like to, if we do get a recess at some point in here, you can fill it out and take your name off. By the way, the next time somebody comes to the door with a petition, ask for the material. Tell them you'll look it over. You'll get back to them if you're interested. You got stuff on the oven. Gotta go. Have a nice day. Close the door. Look over the material in the quiet of your home. Check out both sides. Act accordingly. That's all I got.
If you already spoke, wait for everybody else to speak, then if there's time, you can speak
I
again.
need to object.
Yes. Give everybody a chance to speak first.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a point. It's presently B2, so I don't see any Home Depots or big box stores built in the site presently, but we haven't even considered the possibility of a B1, which is an even lighter commercial footprint. More setbacks, less lot coverage, and there's also other possibilities too, residential, things like that. So I got laughed at last council meeting saying that we were rushing this. I'd like to get all the facts and all the public opinion on this before we change the character of the town forever.
I mean, you know, Mr. Manager put out this letter to everyone, and it was basically scaring them that they were going to have homes that...
That's for another time. Sorry. Anyone else like to speak?
Hi, thank you.
Want to
And
use the
to
mic?
all of the people who've shown up here tonight. My
Excuse
name
me?
is Brian Caldwell. I live at 4 Wickham Road. And I saw a tape measure here earlier tonight. And it was taken out to here, and to here, and to here. And I can tell you that I live within this sound. If you can hear me, I live close enough to the property. I believe the owner of the property should be able to develop it and turn it into something that makes the board happy and makes all of us happy. So I ask all of you to hear my voice and to hear the voice of the owners of the property and of the board, and to find that common ground. It's not that hard.
Thank you, sir.
Richard Catanacci. I live at 18 Wickham. One of the things that, many things, of course, have been said here tonight that make sense, and we all have dreams, and we'd all like to have the money for it to be open spaces and it never be developed. From their lips to God's ears. But we have to deal with the realities. But one of the realities that I am concerned about, and I speak, I think, on behalf of the people of Wickham Manor, is the buffer. Clearly, a 30-foot buffer is a lot better than a 20-foot buffer. Now, I've read 22505, and I believe under the ordinance 22505, we're entitled, Mr. Raffetto, to it, a minimum of 20 feet.
You're referring to the minimum rear yard setback in the B3,
Yes,
the
yes.
proposed B3 zone? Yes,
Yes.
20 feet.
Right, that's the minimum. The newspapers were saying that we were going to get 10 feet of what's presently there, that they weren't going to remove the trees. That's first 10 feet of the trees that are there. And then we would get 20 beyond that. That's 30 feet. I think I know for myself, and I think I speak for most of the owners of Wickham who border on that fence, the entire length of this property, 30 feet would be much more acceptable in terms of, how we live. I appreciate the fact that right now, if they had residences, I guess the question is whether it could be 10 or 20 feet off the property. And more importantly, that's not necessarily a buffer. That could be a backyard. I understand. So the buffer thing is terribly important to the residents of Wickham Manor. And 62 of us, I think, are on the same page. We believe we have a beautiful community. We've maintained it as a beautiful community. It is very large rateable, and cost, it's a valuable rateable in the sense that I think at the present time, we have 62 units, and I think you have 2 children in your school system. Because we are mostly one-bedroom units, and we are mostly, like myself, older folks. So I would ask you to consider amending the back line, the buffer line, to 30 feet from 20 feet.
Thank you, thank you.
Can I ask you a question to the council?
Yes, sir.
I just have a question with what the gentleman just brought up. Mentioned a 30-foot buffer, 10 feet existing trees. The B3 zone, the minimum is a 20-foot buffer, correct?
20-foot rear yard.
Okay, so then where did the 30 feet come from? That was just proposed.
Perhaps.
I think the gentleman was just saying that he read somewhere it would be 30 feet.
He said he read the CoStar.
But that's not correct, right? The CoStar was incorrect by saying it would be a 30-foot buffer.
Well, the minimum rear yard setback is listed in the ordinance and the schedule as being 20 feet.
20 feet, okay, so that's what the buffer would be.
So if you have a B3 zone, it's 20 feet, it's not going to be 30 feet.
It's a B1 has the same set.
It is a
buffer.
minimum of 20 feet. Correct. It is a minimum of 20 feet.
Right, so is the B2 and the B1. They're all the same.
So now, what are you saying, Rich, that when you say minimum of, does that mean that we can make it what we want it here on council before it goes back to the planning board?
If you want to amend,
Well, then,
if you
why
want to
wouldn't we
amend
do
the
that?
ordinance,
Why wouldn't we do that for residential? I mean, if we could do that for residential, the same way, an ordinance, I mean, the problem that was presented when I went around Wickham Manor is everybody wants the property to remain the way it is. And the idea that we have one family that made an application and to the planning board, and in the application, there was commercial properties on the regular zone for B2, and then there was residential properties in the back. Now, it's 2 residential lots. The idea that we, with open space money, can't buy 2 residential lots and stop this, and just stop this, and with open space money, that would that not make everybody in Wickham Manor happy? Your rear, everything would be the same. We as a town could buy the 2 residential lots, but this has not even been discussed. We're just gonna push through B3. B3, everybody wants, even Wickham Manor wants B3. I went around Wickham Manor. You guys all feel that everything's gonna be taken down, and there's gonna be a building right next to you. And that is not necessarily true. That's why we're here. That's the whole power of the petition is to slow this process down and try and get to the bottom of what makes everybody for our community happen. And I don't just mean the people that are 200 feet, because there's a lot of people in this town that don't want Brook 35 on 71. Because this is retail. B3 is retail. That's 7 days a week. And you guys aren't going to complain now, but when people are delivering newspapers to the right, and all you've got is a parking lot, there's nothing to hide the noise. You're going to be waking up by the signs that are on all night, by people making deliveries at 4 o'clock. Talk to people who live around Dunkin' Donuts. They get deliveries at 4 in the morning. Talk to people who live by 7-Eleven. 7-Eleven, they get deliveries all the time. If you live near the residential property, then you have a family, and that's one, that can be a problem. I'm not saying that it can't, but you don't have the kind of noise pollution you're gonna have, whether it's by signage or by people, trucks and everything else.
Thank you.
If I could just, for clarification purposes, in a residential, currently as this is denoted as an R5, the minimum rear yard is 10 feet. 10 feet. That's 10 feet from your property line. Now, if I'm a homeowner, and I put up a house, and I've got 10 feet behind that yard, where am I putting my barbecue? Where am I putting my patio set? I'm putting it behind my house, right up against your fence. And when I'm making the lousy hamburgers and the terrible smelling sausages or whatever else someone else might not like, you're gonna get to smell it. Now imagine that all along your fence. Now, even if we go to an R1, which is a minimum lot area of 40,000 square feet, but only a minimum rear yard of 30 feet. I own that 30 feet. There's trees in there right now. I buy the house, there's trees. I don't have enough room for a patio. What am I going to do? I'm going to take those trees down. It's exactly what I'm going to do. So, let's not confuse residential and business buffering.
Excuse me, Mayor, we seem to be having some interference with the sound system. If you could bear with me a second.
Yes,
see if we can.
sure.
I don't know whether it's,
I can speak loud enough.
but I was trying to avoid.
Okay. The difference between a residential lot and a business setback, in the business setback, yes, the planning board can direct what's planted there. And I would encourage you all to go into the office, and the plans are there, Independence Bank, which is moving from one corner of Warren Avenue to the northwest, Investor Savings, I'm sorry. Investor Savings that's moving from the southeast corner to the northwest corner of Warren Road, put in a buffer for the residents. In fact, when they first came to the planning board, we did not like the plan. We actually got them to turn the building
Excuse me, Councilman,
around.
isn't this the voice of the public right now?
I'm just answering a question.
Oh, okay.
We actually got them to turn the building around, which increased the buffer by nearly 30 feet, 20 feet of which will be planted. That's the difference. I just want to be very clear. The difference between a residential buffer and the buffer in a business zone is that in a business zone, that buffer can be forced to be planted. You cannot, once someone buys that house, they're going to do what they want because it's their property.
Thank you. Peter?
Thank you.
I'd like to clarify a few points, someone that spoke up. I'm curious, Mr. Manger, I believe you said you were a real estate agent, so with $9 million, wouldn't that be about $500,000 worth of commission for you, if all those properties were sold?
Oh, should I only have those?
Okay, all right. Another correction I'd like to make is that the plan, not every member of the planning board voted that through. Certain members did have to abstain from that. Oh, by the way, I'm Rita Murphy, Highway 71, 2014 Highway 71. I live in what's called the gingerbread house. And if you live in town long enough, my house is a landmark. It is between the Christine Keating building and the 7-Eleven. And everyone comments what it must be like to live there. It is charming, it is darling. It is also right about the point in town where people approaching from Wall Road and Allaire Road are now hitting maximum speed of 35 miles per hour. And I really enjoy when I'm coming home and your kid is on its bicycle and they're on the sidewalk, to which there's a telephone pole and a brick retaining wall, and I need to make a hard right turn. This happened the other day to a Spring Lake police officer as children were pedaling to the 7-Eleven. There's a lot of traffic there. It is a narrow road. kids fall. People fall on bicycles all of the time. So, because when you are on a bicycle, it is technically illegal to pedal on the sidewalk because you are a motor vehicle. So if we are going to be encouraging foot traffic, we need to do something to have maybe a lane for bicycles in this particular area. The problem with this particular zoning request is B1 would be the lightest. And thank you for that. I appreciate that. I missed that one. I thought it, but I forgot about it. The problem is that this feels like a definite rush to judgment. And, you know, you are likely here to listen to the residents. And there's something here. Now, this letter that was introduced to exclude St. Stephen's is a change to the ordinance. However, the current application that also exists is grandfathered under a B2 ordinance, and the town must abide by that. So, those would be other properties that would also now need to be excluded in this particular ordinance, because it would not be possibly considered on the up and up, and the borough attorney would know better than I would, to suddenly keep them in this B3 zone, when in fact their application is filed. The application does not have to be heard, it is on the date of filing. I did my research and I read that countless times, it is on the date of filing. So currently, right now, they're in a B2 zone and they can build in their B2 zone. They do not, they're grandfathered in automatically. So they are included in this particular ordinance, but they cannot, if you change it, you might actually be opening up the borough for a questionable suit. Because right now, the applicant has two choices, either build under B2 or withdraw their application and then, of course, be under B3. Fine. However, that would then now also give the borough the opportunity to consider, and you know, open space is not a bad idea to buy those 2 acres, because you could take that open space and you could make it what's called inherently beneficial for your residents. Those 2 lots could be turned into solar fields, which could generate power for the town. Not a bad thought. It could be a school for everyone to go, instead of having to send them to Manasquan. Inherently beneficial use. However, everyone just seems so gung-ho for B3. And because there's a door open tonight by excluding St. Stephen's Pubs, my suggestion is that when you pass this ordinance, including in this, is that this be what's called a green zone. In 2009, the borough passed a resolution committing itself to support a model of government which benefits our residents now and far into the future by exploring and adopting sustainable, economically sound local government practices. It is resolution number 159-209, and it was signed by the borough clerk, Teresa Casagrande, on November 23rd. And it was A's, Mr. Brennan, Ms. Cynthia, you happen to be absent, Ms. Crippen, Councilman Kiegelman, Mayor, you actually also voted yes, and former Councilman McLean. So, you've made this commitment. Put it where your votes are. Because this, to me, is going to be the best, happiest medium to move forward on this ordinance as it is, without considering the sustainable New Jersey thing that Ms. Crippen signed up and apparently had run them up, because around you, surrounding towns, there are 516 municipalities in New Jersey, and there's a number of them that have 386 have registered, 116 of them are certified, 105 have bronze level, and the rest have silver. Now, the only one around us that has a bronze certification, guess who? Belmar. Around us, also in Monmouth County, Long Branch, who's not our closest neighbor, Ocean Township, Monmouth Beach, and Shrewsbury. You know that you can get points, and by doing this, you in turn can get grant money for the town to build that community property on the Fletcher property, that community garden that was mentioned. You can also get other benefits. The town holds a paper shredding day. That's 5 points. The minimum for a bronze level is 180. Sounds small. And the way to achieve this is to, before this goes through, is you want to pass what's called a sustainable land pledge. And you have a green team. Very easy. You could make ordinances to help your environment instead of, if this is going to be what you want there, then do it smart. You have the obligation to plan. Sustainability or sustainable development has been defined as a development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is a UN World Commission in 1987, or simply focuses on providing the best outcomes for both human and natural environments. Natural light, people are more productive employee. Who doesn't want that? You're also a happier employee. Did you know towns that are tree rich have less crime? That's a study from 2001, if anyone would like to have where I get my information from. Furthermore, in 2011, the governor, who rocks by the way, passed a energy conservation bill to reduce energy. A few goals of the New Jersey Master Energy Plan are to reduce the total energy consumption in New Jersey by 20% by the year 2020. Buildings account for most of the use in this country, approximately more than half. Why can't this have natural lighting, or what they call, Mr. May, trom walls, I think they're called, solar panels, rain gardens, and other things? Why can't there be a walking path around here? Why can't you incorporate it both? Why can't you make it a healthy B3 zone? One that people are going to be happy. Not only that, if you champion this, you are thinking about the generation and the legacy that you yourself want to leave behind. It just seems foolish to pass this right now without taking these things into account, because something tells me this is not going to suddenly turn into a B1, and it's not going to turn into residential. I think the buffers could be larger in the front. I think they should match the B2 zone and be at least 20 feet. And I don't think that's it. But the truth is, investing in this would be investing with a long-term approach in mind. And it's a value-added thing. And it's an upside potential with the least amount of downside risk. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Doyle, 27 Wickham Road. This is my first public meeting, and I have to say I'm very impressed by all of the residents here in Spring Lake. We lived in our townhouse for about 9 years. My wife just retired, we're spending more time. This is our second home. Looking at what's taking place here, obviously there's a rezoning, and it's going from residential to commercial, and that's creating a lot of value. And looking at it, when you're creating value, there's a quid pro quo. If you want something, you have to give something. And we've heard a lot tonight about what's expected with the zoning and creating that value. And I just went over, I've never been to a meeting, as I said, and I haven't really stayed up on top of this issue, but I did receive a zoning ordinance. And I said, let me look at this. And I have to say I was very surprised because there was a rezoning, and it was going from residential. I happened to look at when I bought my property, and I did look at all the contiguous properties, and they're all residential. That made me feel secure. I also looked at the Highway 71, and it was mostly residential there. I understand the need for the mayor and council looking at some kind of rateable base. I also look at this as a quality of life issue. I felt very strongly that my neighbor had expressed about the buffer in the rear. I think 20 feet, when you're taking down all those trees, is really insignificant. I noticed also, as the resident pointed out, there was less buffer in the front. My reaction was, let's make it up and beef up the rear. And also for the Hampton Court people. It's anybody who's represented. You're going to establish a precedent here, and that's why I hear all of the, along the highway, people are concerned. Everybody's always afraid of the unknown, because nobody really knows what's here. There is no site plan, haven't reviewed anything. So what's going to really take place here? I see the drugstore or whatever. I heard Fred comment about the 3,000. I don't know what the square footage, but I would hate to see a CVS, and I guess that's not permitted here, because any kind of intense use, you're going to bring a lot of traffic. Looking at this, just some of the things that I see as quality of life issues. Certainly the rear setback. I would like a greater buffer. Looking at the lighting fixtures. You want lower poles, you don't want those lights shining on them. And maybe it's going to cost a little bit more, but it will be much more aesthetically pleasing. If you look at any kind of shrubbery in the parking, instead of just the blacktop, it softens it up. More shrubbery and more plantings and greater height. I understand there's a 6 foot, what have you. And we all talk about we're going to save the trees, we're going to save the trees. I happen to have seen a lot of development. And when you get into doing the site prep for that, you find out, the developer comes back and says, the root structure has been diminished and compromised. I have to take down the trees. More trees come down from when you're doing the construction. If you're really going to be prudent, you should go out and do that study and mark those trees. And then there's no mistake, this tree stays. That shows at least good faith on the residents' part that you're talking about here. I think you all did a very credible job. I hear two sides of the issue. I've always found at public meetings, I learn a whole lot more, because there's more wisdom out there than there is with a small group. I have to say this, I've been where you are. I've attended 900 meetings, so I've gone through the public give and take. But I have to say, I'm very impressed. I think this can be resolved. I think people have to listen to what you heard tonight, address it, and I think you could come up with something really quality that doesn't have a negative impact. And the people who signed the petition, they came around, whatever. I invited them in, and because I wanted to hear what's the other side thinking, what have you. And I think the development could happen. I mean, everybody loves green space and what have you, green acres, and that's a possibility. Many times you find out that it's not as feasible as you look. If that is an option, that's great. So in the end, I think there's a traffic study, there's off-street parking, there's lighting poles, there's loading fixtures, there's dumpsters that have to be away from existing residential. Anytime you get an intense use, you always have that potential rodent problem. Not saying we're going to get it. There's certainly ways of doing it and fighting it, but you don't want that next to a residential home. So overall, I want to thank you for the opportunity. I think you've been very good and very gracious with all of us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else like to speak in the ordinance? Yes. Anyone else like to speak the first time? You may. Oh, I'm sorry. Sir.
Good evening. My name is Neil Cornelius, excuse me. Cornelius Kading, and I have a situation with setbacks you're talking about. I face the old Allstate building on 71. That is lot 801. Lot 7 is the smaller of all the lots, and there are 2 houses on it. There's no side yard. I can touch it with my hand. What's going to happen with that building? It becomes commercial. I'd be able to put my hand on a commercial building. I'm not happy with it. There are 2 buildings on that piece. They're both rented out, okay? So can anybody tell me about this?
Please.
What's gonna happen to these buildings?
The two, sir,
There are two buildings on one piece of property facing 71.
will they be, if they, they would be in the B3.
Lot 7.
Yeah, they'd
What
be-
would occur is if the buildings were taken down in their current state, they would be grandfathered.
Yes.
If they remained in their current state. If those buildings were taken down, they would be subject to the rules of B3. Meaning
Okay.
probably that rear building would not be
Yeah.
able to be put back up.
But what will happen when you pass this to that building? Can he do what he wants? Can I have a store there that can reach out and touch a blacksmith shop or something?
No, because there's no buffer.
Well, they would have to.
There is no buffer.
No, there wouldn't be in
But
the
those are
B3.
residences now.
How could you have a buffer? The men couldn't paint the wall because of my picket fence and that wall, they couldn't get the equipment. That's how close this building is. It's a pre-existing condition. I can live with that.
But it's a residence of the current state.
Yes.
If you changed it to a business, I believe they would be subject to the B3 zone.
Well, that's what I'm afraid of.
Well, that building would have to, would not be able to exist.
It wouldn't be as close to your property.
Well, it's a pre-existing condition, so wouldn't that building just stay there, become a store?
Not necessarily.
What would happen to it?
If the building is currently used as a residence, and they wanted to change it to a business, right now as a residence, that's what's grandfathered in.
Yes, that's right.
If you were to change it to a business, it's no longer grandfathered in, meaning they would have to take that building down.
Oh, yeah.
It would
my
not
question.
be the
I
setbacks.
didn't know that, okay.
Yes, it would not meet the setback
But
requirements.
you didn't tell me that the last time we talked, I guess. we
I didn't
left
get
that out.
much further than
I just want to clarify if I could. The building wouldn't necessarily have to come down, but it couldn't be used.
Couldn't be used.
In accordance with the B3 zoning.
Right.
You'd need to have site plan, that would have to go to the planning board for site plan because we'd be switching from a residential use to a commercial use. And it wouldn't meet the requirements of the B3 zone, so in all likelihood, that wouldn't be allowed.
You could request a
Is that because
variance.
it's a side yard?
You could request a use variance, correct, Counselor?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Correct.
I doubt they can.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, Sharon.
Sharon Bateau, Beverly Avenue. All right, I am trying to be respectful, but Mr. Manger just got my Irish up. I want to tell you, Mayor, I did not go to anyone's house and yell at them to sign my petition. I asked people respectfully to sign my petition. If they didn't want to sign my petition, I did not browbeat them or bully them. I respectfully walked away. Most places I went where I was allowed to go, my petition was signed freely and without coercion. And I really don't think it's appropriate for Mr. Manger to use this forum for his pulpit to tell people to come and take their signatures back. That's not right. I'm working very hard on that, and it seems that I'm satisfying the criteria. I mean, do I have to open a vein next? I mean, really? And I know that Mr. Manger sent around a letter at Wickham Manor asking people not to sign my petition. I don't go through intimidation. And I think someone else, and I was told, I'll put it this way, because I'm trying to be respectful here. I was told someone from council, at one of the places I got a signature from, had called them the day before asking them not to sign my petition. And I think that's highly irregular.